Hey everyone, how's it going? In this video, I speak to David Wright, who's been a resident and living in Spain for 22 years and lives in Almeria in the south of Spain in Andalusia. I talked to him about life in Spain, learning the language, challenges with learning the language, settling in, and what it's like being a Brit living abroad. It's a great chat. The chat starts pretty much half in between because I forgot to press record on the video. There's a lot of great information in there. I hope you enjoy it. God bless. Thank you for being here. Subscribe, like, share for more. Yeah.
And as far as the teaching goes, I've been on a course. I learned Spanish the hard way. I went to school here learning Spanish, hated the classes, hated learning English in England. So coming here doing the courses in classes was a struggle. After a month, I packed it in and I found an English teacher or Spanish teacher that spoke English. And I said, I was working as a carpenter then. I said, look, I need to speak Spanish now, I want private lessons. So we did private lessons. In the first week, it's like comer, comáis, comemos, comen, the verb to eat. I went, well, I need to speak now. How long is this going to take? Oh, a couple of years. I went, no, I need to go and order my materials tomorrow in the hardware store, my windows and my doors. And he shook his hands and said, I can't help you. So I said, listen, I've got an idea. What about if we do role play? And he didn't understand what that was at first. But I said, you be the shopkeeper. So on my first lesson, I'd go in and say, hello, good morning. I'm here to come and buy some nails. He would be the owner of a ferreteria, a hardware shop. So I'd come and order some nails and screws, and he would ask me questions related. The next lesson would be in the timber shop or in the sand and cement shop, and it was all stuff that I was going to be using. And that is how I learned to speak. No reading, no writing. Well, about 6 months ago, I saw a Spanish guy doing online courses. So I clicked on the link, got to speak to them, and you pay to join his course. It's a brand new course, just started. So he got no students started at the moment. So I said, well, I'm interested, tell me more. And he's a linguistics professor. He's got a doctorate in linguistics, speaks about 5 languages. And he's taught his best friend, who is Spanish, to teach this system where he did his PhD in it. So he said it's no reading, no writing. It's how children learn from a very young age. They don't learn to read and write till they're 5 or 6, 7 years old. So he said, but they can speak their language. So he said, he designed this course. He's done his PhD thesis on it and written a couple of books. So that interested me because it related to how I learned Spanish. And he said, you can adapt it to any language. So I joined the course, and there's another English lady was joined with me at the same time. And I learned to teach his system, still learning now. It's a weekly online course, but there's obviously lots of text that we can read ourselves on the line, the course. But we have a Zoom meeting like this, going through stuff. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, he said to me, it's about time you started advertising for students and think about trying it out. I haven't quite finished the course yet, but I'm almost there. And he said, I think you're ready. So I did a mock lesson online with him the other week, and I put some posters out. And I only put out 40 posters around where I live. And I got a phone call the other day from a Spanish lady that speaks a little bit of English. She wants to learn, but she's not happy with the classes. So I did my first lesson yesterday with her, private lesson. And it went pretty well, a bit nerve-wracking for me because it's the first time I've done anything like that. And she was so happy with it that she's booked another lesson for tomorrow, and she wants to make it a regular thing. So it's at the moment it's going okay. I've only done one lesson, but I'm charging €20 an hour for the lesson, which I've looked into a lot. And there's people here, Spanish people teaching languages, and they're charging 35 an hour for a private lesson. So I thought €20 an hour at my home for people local, I think that's fair price. So yeah, so that's basically where I am at the moment. I'm trying this out as a sideline. I mean, if I can get 3 or 4 people for an hour a week, that would be great, little extra income. It's something anyone can do with any language. That's what appealed to me. And also when in the course, because Javier is the linguistics professor, and his friend Bruno is now living in England, and he's teaching English people how to speak Spanish because he is Spanish, with this same system. And he's got classes of 10 or 12 people, and he's charging £10 a lesson, and his classes are booked up. So the system works. It's working for me, although I've only done one person, so I can't say that I'm an expert yet. But it's working, and the system works. It's interesting. So that's my project. But today, I'm been in meetings. This is my seventh meeting today with the Voz de Almeria. I don't even know, and they're the biggest national newspaper in Andalusia, and they've got a media company with radio, television, podcasts. Well, they were bought out last year for 10 million euros by a company called Novatech, and they're a big publicity company here in Spain. All sorts of television programs. That they wanted me to host a new project that they're starting, and it's going to be an online website where I'm going to create content that like I've been doing about visas, people of interest here in Spain, in the way of video, audio, personal interviews, online interviews, and later on some TV as well. So today I've been I thought I was going to sign contracts today, but we had another meeting with the finance department. It's crazy here in Spain, as you know, and the costs
Yeah,
have gone through the roof. It's approaching 100,000 a year investment on their part. But they seem happy with that. Now it's just getting some sales team together to promote the business, to promote the advertising side of it. And once that's done, it'll all go live, hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. My plan with it, my dream with it, as I've spoken to them, is to do a mini series where I'm driving around Spain on my motorbike, because I like motorbikes, drive around Spain, interviewing people of interest, companies of interest, and getting them to invest in an advert on the show, and just really doing a program about all the great things Spain's got to offer.
yeah. I saw a clip from your website. I think it was from a place in the sun. I think you're on your motorbike.
Yeah, I've been on the TV a few times. I was interviewed
Yeah.
on the BBC a couple of times. I was on the BBC News when they had the COVID crisis, and we
Mm.
had the lockdown, and Spain was one of the first to go into lockdown. So they phoned me up out of the blue. I thought it was a joke at first, and
Yeah.
they wanted me to go live that night. And my house wasn't finished; it was a building site at the time. And when you see the video, in the background, there's plasterboard and nails hanging out the wall and all that sort of thing. And the director said to me, before we go on air, have you got another room with a better background? I said, this is it. That's the only wall in the house, we're building. So I went live with that. It was about half an hour interview, I think, talking about COVID, completely off the cuff. But I've done a few BBC interviews on the radio in the past, but they tend to twist my wording around. They're always looking for a narrative. So I'm not keen
Yeah.
on doing BBC interviews anymore. The last interview I gave to them, an audio interview, was about the heat wave we had last year. But it's always hot in Spain. They phoned me up in
Right.
August and said, wanted me to build up how the British people are suffering in Spain and all that. And they twisted the words around in the article. David said people were in hospital because of the. It's August. It's Spain. It's always blooming hot here. What do you expect? But anyway, but yeah, I've been on Channel 4, Place in the Sun, because the guy that was buying, and he actually went and bought later on in the show. He had a motorbike, so they wanted me to come down on my motorbike and just pull up. And we was there filming all morning. But if you watch the video, I think I'm on telly for about a minute or something, less than that. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a bit of fun. But that's the sort of thing I want to do. And with this production company, and fingers crossed that we should be sorted out. I thought it was going to be sorted out before Christmas, but the costs of, I mean, the filming costs, all this is new to me. The filming costs are horrendous. We're talking about 1,000 a day for a TV crew, just basic sound man, sound, audio, and video. Then there's a production cost and everything else. So yeah, it's an expensive project, but that's my dream project, to get in with that side of it. But I do at the moment radio shows, the interviews, podcasts, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, man. Sounds like you got a load of projects on. Load. Really busy. Can I ask you about Spain and life in Spain?
Sure.
How's it been like settling in? Because a few of my clients that are learning languages with me, in particular Spanish, they're there with the kind of pipe dream of, oh, a few years when I retire, I want to live in Spain. So they're kind of prepping themselves for that. What's been, would you say, the biggest cultural like shock living in Spain? You're from Brighton originally, is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Brighton on the south coast, and I worked as a carpenter then. My ambition was to come to Spain because I was fed up with the cold weather. Working outside as a builder in the wind
Mm,
and the rain, it's great in the summer, but in the winter lasts for 7, 8 months. So it's
yeah.
in Brighton on the seafront in August, lovely, but in November, December, with the tools outside, cold, wet, running down your. So Spain was for me, but the main shock was I moved here in July, got a job straight away for a building company here, an English building company, and I was working in 42 degrees of heat the first week I was here. So coming from Brighton, that was I was out of my depth with the heat, and I suffered the first couple of weeks. I suffered big time with the heat. Um, it was I thought I'd made a mistake, but you get used to it, you acclimatise to it, and then the second year round I was more prepared. That was great. But I worked for them for 2 years, and after that I wanted to set up on my own. And the biggest shock, and the thing I tell everybody here, is the language. You've got to learn the language. And us Brits are lazy when it comes to learning another language. When all the world speaks, English nowadays, it's difficult. But here in Spain, you can live perfectly well if you're retired and not speak a word of Spanish. But going self-employed here, trying to set up a business, if you don't speak the language, as I didn't at the time, it's okay if you've got a job for an English company, but you're limiting your income to half the income because you can only work for English speaking people. So the day I went self employed, started learning to speak Spanish, I could start to build that up, and I got Spanish clients and doubling your income, because you can work for Spanish and English people here. There is a captive market, whatever you're doing work wise here. If you work for British people, that's great. But if you can work for the Spanish as well, you can double your income.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So you got a lot more business opportunities. And then just every like your day-to-day life, right? Going into the shops and stuff. Because I remember in Spain and even in Madrid, which is like a big cosmopolitan city, people don't speak English, They speak very, very little English and they really love it when you speak to them in Spanish. Like have you
Yeah.
found like the reaction of the Spaniards just been they treat you completely differently, I found. What was it like for you when you started to
Yeah.
speak to them in Spanish instead of English?
Well, my wife, I, I met my wife at a salsa dancing club, and because she was
Uh,
learning. I was married originally, and when I moved here, my wife didn't like it. My first wife, after 17 years, we split up. So I was here on my own for 2 years, and I was going mad. I thought I've got to get out and speak to somebody because I was working all the time, not socializing. So I thought I'd join a mountain climbing club, learn rock climbing and mountain climbing, and salsa dancing, completely out of my depth. I'm not a dancer at all, but I love the music. And that's how I met my wife. And she was learning English at an academy here. She's been learning for 2 or 3 years, but she could write it and read it, but she couldn't speak it. So we hooked up and just had a conversation. My Spanish was very bad then. Her English was very bad. So that opened up doors to me. And then obviously when we were married, I had a lot more friends and family that are related Spanish. So I speak Spanish all the time now to my wife at home. We speak Spanish all the time. I have got little English friends only online that I speak English or like this. The rest of the time it's all Spanish. So you've got to immerse yourself in it. And I've been to Madrid several times. We've got family in Madrid, and as you say, I haven't met anybody local that speaks English. Or if they say, "Yeah, I speak English," very very little Spanish. Sometimes you say, "Do you speak English?" and say, "Yes, I speak English," but when you start talking to them, they really don't. It's the same with the English people. You say, "Do you speak Spanish?" Say un poco, but they can order a beer, they can order a plate of food, and that is it. When it comes to going to the local council, town hall, getting your water bill connected or something like that, they can't do it. And that's why you need to learn the language because you pay for it otherwise. I mean, I had to get my car ITV'd when I first came here, like an MOT, and I couldn't speak Spanish. And you know what it's like here in Spain? They put a walkie-talkie on the car window, and they tell you through the walkie-talkie to drive the car through. And it's like a conveyor belt system. So you pull forward, lights on, handbrake on, turn the steering wheel, things like that, all spoken through a walkie-talkie on the windowsill. So if you don't speak very good Spanish, you have to pay somebody. And I paid somebody €35 to sit in the car with me to tell me what to do, you know? So you pay all the time. You can do it, you can survive, but you know, it's a shame. It's like people say to me, I want to come to Spain to earn a living. Can I find work after a little while there? I mean, sure, fine, but what sort of work do you want? And do you speak Spanish? Because if you don't, it's like I always say, it's like going to London and you're a Chinaman, you don't speak any English. What sort of job are you going to get in London? You know, if you can't speak the language and you haven't got the skills, you're going to struggle. Same applies here in Spain. So, number one thing is learn the language, and learn before you even come to Spain, because even the basics will help you more than you know.
Mm-mm. And can I ask you, like, your experience learning the language? What was the hardest thing for you, do you think? What is
The
something,
hardest
and you see a lot of English people struggle with when they try and like learn Spanish. What's the biggest like block?
I think the main thing with the difficulty for me, and still is the verbs. And as my Spanish wife said, it takes children, Spanish children, 2 or 3 years to learn the verbs in school. So a British person learning the language for the first time is going to take at least that, you know, to learn the verbs. For example, you know, I often say to my wife now, if she's on the phone at work and she says to me, "Have you eaten?" And I say, "Sí, yo comí en mi casa antes." Or I get it round the wrong way, past, present, and future tense, you know. Have you eaten, or are you going to eat in the future? You know, in English, you say, you know, I eat, you eat, she eats, we eat, they eat. But in Spain, you've got the past, present, future, masculine, feminine. So just one
Mm.
word is multiplied. So it's difficult. And I still make the mistakes. But the thing is, if, for example, you want to go and say in a restaurant, I would like to eat, you say, yo quiero comer. The verb to eat, comer. That's enough. They will understand, you know, even if it's wrong. And you can conjugate the verb or put it in the right text later, as long as you try. And the Spanish don't
Mm.
judge you if you try, you know, but it's, yeah, the verbs are very difficult. That is, and the other thing is, British people that normally move here, they stay in communities, as I did when I first moved here, in a small British community. And it's very easy to stay stuck in that community and not venture out. Go to the English bars, go to the English clubs and things like that, have an English beer, great. But you're missing out. You know, you can go to the Spanish bar next door. The food and drink is cheaper most of the time anyway. And I did that. I pushed myself going to where the Spanish go. Not only is it cheaper, but I make friends that way, made clients that way, earned money from them, and was invited to functions, parties, um, go to where they go to get their car repaired. It's cheaper. Go and do it, you know. So really immerse yourself with the Spanish side of it. It's a couple of years of struggling to do that, and you've got to push yourself. It's not easy, but if you make the effort, the Spanish are very welcoming.
Yeah, and in a way, I find that you actually stand out. It's easier to stand out, right? Because, like you said, so many English people they stay in those little like English groups. They don't move out. They don't integrate very much. So if you're like a giri, which is how they say gringo in Spain, right? If you're a giri and you're clearly English, you've got an English accent, but you speak Spanish and you're trying to speak the language, like you said, yeah, they receive you so well. So like for building relationships, I found, I don't know if you found that as well. It sounds like you did. It's actually a lot easier, you know, because you stand out. They all know who you are because
Yeah,
you're
what
the
you
giddy
said about
who speaks Spanish. Mm.
the word you just said, giddy. Years ago, when I
Yeah.
went to go, I was still learning Spanish. My Spanish was very bad. And I went to a building merchants to order some wood. And I didn't want to go to where all the tourists buy their wood. I wanted to go to the wholesalers and buy it cheap where the Spanish go. So I went to this big company, and it's a big warehouse. I've gone in, and at reception, they said to me, I had a piece of paper with what I wanted, a couple of sheets of wood. And they said in Spanish, go and see the guy over there. And there was this old guy cutting wood. And I went over to him and I tried to speak, and he looked at me and he told me to go away, go away, go away. And I said, but I want to go away. He just hasn't got time to, don't speak English, don't speak English. So I went back to the office and they sent me back to the old guy. In the end, I walked away embarrassed, told my Spanish teacher at the time what had happened, but I need to go back. I need to buy this wood, otherwise it's more expensive. I said, I need an icebreaker, you know, and he didn't know what the term icebreaker was. He thought it meant a pickaxe or something. And he said, next time you go to him, say this phrase. And it was, hola, soy Giri, no tonto, ¿puedo ayudarme, por favor? Which is, I'm,
Amazing.
and years ago, the word Giri was quite derogatory. It was a bit of a bad word, but now it's just a jokey word. It means bloody tourist, really, you know? So I said that to the guy, and the old guy looked at me, he laughed, and he went, what do you want? You know? And after that, every
Amazing.
time I went in, they go, hola, Giri, que quiere? So, you know, it's that breaking that atmosphere. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
I love that. I love that. And yeah, just to translate that bit, what you said for people who don't speak Spanish, what is it? Soy guiri, no soy tonto. I'm
Yeah,
a guiri, I'm a
yeah,
foreigner, I'm not stupid. Can you help me,
yeah.
please, man?
He told to me, my Spanish teacher says to me at the time, it sort of means I'm a bloody tourist, but I'm not stupid. Can you help me? You know? And it just got a little chuckle out of the guy. Um, but the same in England. If you went when I was working in England as a carpenter, if you went in a builder's merchant, if a woman went in, not being sexist, but if a woman went into a builder's merchant, most builder's merchants they haven't got time because that woman doesn't know what she wants, or that man in a suit and a briefcase, he doesn't know what he wants. You know, they're looking for builders. What, mate? What you got? I want this, I want that, bang, and they're in and out. So it's the same in Spain, you know. So it saved me a lot of money buying my materials from merchants like that, and still does. But you need to get in there. You need to get past that embarrassment part, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and it's human nature, right? It's human nature for us to judge people and be like and have our stereotypes. So it's for the person, the immigrant in your case, to actually break those stereotypes, you know, and by using a bit of slang. This is what I teach my clients this early on, you know. In a lot of courses, they'll be like, no, slang is advanced Spanish. You need to learn all of this before you learn slang. But actually, as you've shown there, like it's such a good icebreaker. Using words like
I,
giddy, I find what that kind of tells to the native person is you actually care about their culture, you know,
yeah,
using words like giddy and don, like it, apart from it being funny, which humor is always a great icebreaker, it shows that you actually care about
yeah.
their culture, you know, you're not just there using them for their sunshine or beautiful women or whatever, you know.
So, yeah, it's like when you start mixing with Spanish people. When I was before I was married, I was on this. I joined this walking club and climbing club, so I get on walks and stuff, and none of them were English. I made a point of that, and so I had to learn. You know, and you're out walking with these people every Sunday afternoon for about 2 or 3 hours, so you're talking, and they're interested in talking to me and practicing the little English that they know. And I was talking to them when we stop and have a tapper at the end of the day or whatever, you know, or we invited to a party. And the first thing you learn, well, for me, was all the swear words, you know, all the naughty words. You learn like a child, you know, you learn all of that. And then I hear how they talk, you know, and as you say, the slang words, like here in Andalusia, they cut my wife's worst offender. They cut the S off of everything. They don't pronounce the end of the words and things like that. So, you know, two white coffees, dos café con leches, do leche. You know, here they say do leche. Well, really, you're asking for two milks. But if you go in a bar here, they know you want two white coffees, you know? So I speak like that. My wife is still correcting me. She don't speak like that. Well, that's here what they speak like. So I speak like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And going back to the method you talked about earlier, it sounds like yeah, it's the natural way of learning a language. You're doing a lot of listening and being aware of how they speak, and then yeah, just copying them. It's easy to integrate like that, and you can always go and study the language afterwards.
Yeah, the course that I'm enrolled in with
Yeah.
Javier, as I say, he's a linguistics professor. He's got a PhD, and he teaches at the moment. He's in Poland, teaching in the university in Poland, teaching Spanish and English. But he said I have to teach to the school's curriculum, the levels up to B A1, B2, C1, whatever it is. But as he said, these people in on paper they can leave the college with a level of English. But he said I was 9 years studying and I had a PhD in languages, and he went to London. And for the first 10 days, he thought he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He couldn't understand people speaking to him rapidly, you know. And he said after 9 years of being a professor of languages, he said I was shocked. And that's where he changed, did his PhD in this linguistics program that he set up, written books on it. And he said, well, he thought about, how do children learn? And with this system, the idea of it is that you learn to speak by repeating things and advancing slowly, and then reading and writing comes later. Because if you know how,
Yeah.
if you hear the word, like children learn. If you say, "Are you hungry? Do you want a drink? Would you like some water?" and you're making the gestures of drinking a glass of water, they soon learn that's drink. Oh, yes, I want a drink. And then later on, drink, and they won't learn how to spell it. So I think the schools all over the world are teaching the wrong way round. I really do believe that. But, that's the system, that's the way it is. Also, Javier's got students, and Bruno, his friend, who he taught this system, who's teaching in England. He's actually in Bournemouth, and he's teaching English people Spanish. He's using the same system. And people have been in language schools learning Spanish for years, and they're packing that up and moving to him because they say they're learning so much quicker with him. Um, they're not learning to read and write with him as people are not learning that with me. But most people, they want to go out on holiday. They want to go and speak to somebody. They want to go to the airport and check in online and ask where the destinations is and the buses are and things like that. And so really, it's all about speaking, actually speaking it rather than having it on paper.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of what you're saying completely resonates with me. I think I've intuited, I've had to kind of reverse engineer myself, realize, well, how come I'm learning languages so much faster than your average person? And I think it's because I'm doing it like you've talked about, like the natural way. I've looked at kids and I'm like, well, hang on, how do we learn languages naturally? We do a lot of listening first. That comes first. A lot of listening, learn how to listen properly, which a lot of people are not very good at, especially adults. They'll kind of just be in their heads thinking about what they want to say instead of actually being very present and listening. A lot of listening and a lot of speaking. And then, yeah, like you said, the reading and writing comes after, you know, comes after you've learned how to understand and speak the language. And then, as you'll know, that learning the grammar is so much easier, right? Once you can actually understand the language, because you can have a Spanish person explain to you, oh, yeah, by the way, we say, we say this because, or we use the subjunctive here because of this. And you go, oh, that makes sense. You already know how to use it, you already
Yeah.
understand it, but it's just logical. And you're right about schools, man. You are right about schools. I'm kind of in a war against them,
Yeah.
unprogramming all my clients who have had like this fear of making mistakes as well as a big one we learn at school, I find.
But I studied French as a junior in junior school in England because France was near England, so I studied French, and I studied French for 4 years, and then we had an exam, and in the exam it was just an oral exam, and I didn't understand a word, not one single word I was spoken to, not one. Later, I found that one of the questions was, "You've just pulled into the petrol station. Ask the attendant to fill your car up." Well, I'd never learnt that in the 4 years. I'd learnt how to write stuff and words and stuff. No good at all. But I did remember that in my first year, junior school, we did role play where the teacher had paper mache food and drink. And we were, I don't know how old, 8, 10 years old, I suppose. And we sat at a table, and the teacher would say, "Oh, this is your wife." And the kids joke, "Oh, hi, this is my wife. Have a glass of beer." And we had this paper mache beer and a paper mache wine, and we acted out. And I remember words that I learnt then because, it was steak and chips and peas and a beer. As an 8 or 9 year old, that still remembers those words, but I'd never done any reading or writing. It was just role play. So that resonates with me in what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And I think the role play really works, doesn't it? Because you're imagining yourself being in that scenario, and it's going into your subconscious mind rather than what they teach at schools, where you kind of just try and remember all these words, dump them out for a test, and then you can't remember them again because for your unconscious, for your subconscious mind, it's just not relevant,
Yeah.
But if you're even having an imaginary conversation with your wife and a beer or whatever as an 8-year-old, you're going to remember those words because your mind, your subconscious is going, this is important. I need to remember this. And that's what
Yeah.
the role plays. Yeah, it's really, really good.
I think it's like all education, really. I mean, my Spanish wife's son is 35. He's a doctor in chemical engineering for the university in Barcelona. So very intelligent guy, but he can't put a nail or a screw in a piece of wood. That's not. He's not that. He's academically, he's brilliant. He's a genius, but he can't repair a door handle or paint a bedroom, things like that. He's not that way inclined. So, everybody learns differently. They've got their own niche, if you like. But I think for learning languages and moving to Spain, you've got to find what works for you. And in classrooms, for me, I hated classrooms in the UK. And being an older person, I'm 62 now, the thought of going into classrooms, sit there and read and write, and people judging you, probably not judging you, but you feel embarrassed. I'd rather go out salsa dancing and follow what people are doing. I learned bachata, merengue, salsa, paso doble, all the dances from watching and hearing, and the same words are repeated. So I learned that way, and I think you can apply that to many different things. This week this week for the last couple of months now, I've been learning. I want to take my motorbike test here in Spain to get a bigger motorbike, because you can drive a motorbike here up to a 125 on a car license, but if you want a bigger bike than that, you have to take a motorbike exam. Well, last year the rules have changed for the motorbike exam. It's quite intense now, but you can't take a driving test on a motorbike in English. It has to be done in Spanish. So you have to be able to read and write Spanish, and the theory is all done in Spanish, everything. But you have to enroll in a class in school here, and you have to have so many lessons in the school before you can take the theory test out on the street, which is also in 3 parts. So when they have a microphone in the crash helmet and they'll be talking to you, the directions all in Spanish. So I am having to learn and read the book now. So I'm doing it reverse. I'm learning lots of words for the motorbike and the highway code that, I say to my wife, what's that? And she said, I don't know. She doesn't recognize the word because it's specific to highway code and things, So yeah, I'm learning it that way. But I think if you can speak the language first, reading and writing it, I don't think is important, because I mean, today after my interview with this media company, they wanted me to send them some documents over about a proposal about publicizing, and I didn't know they wanted it today. All I did was, hey Siri, how do you do this? Blah, 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 and boom, up it come, and Siri did it for me. But she's just answered. Yeah, so you can do it on your phone, but I use Chat GBT and I just write in English what I want, and I say, now translate that to Spanish, and in seconds it's done. So really, with the technology, there is no reason why you need to read and write it. Obviously, it's great if you can, but if you can speak it, that is much more valuable to actually be able to speak the language,
Yeah, exactly. Because that's how we build connections with people, right? And actually communicate with them, build relationships. It's through speaking. A lot of people, they come at me sometimes with the argument of, well, you see how like technology is going, how fast it's developing and whatnot. Like, why do I need to bother learning like a foreign language? And I'm like, because it's not about the ability to speak a foreign language even. It's the result, what you get from that, like what you get from trying, the communicating, the connecting with people and building relationships. You doesn't matter how good your Siri is at like translating and doing that to communicate with someone. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
Not the same thing.
Well, I bought a plot of land here 4 years ago with my wife. We both sold properties that we had and put all the money in a pot up to our eyeballs in debt to do it. And we've built our own dream 4-bedroom house, got a garden, swimming pool, and I've got underground workshop, a gymnasium, and I'm in my recording studio now for my radio. I do my radio shows from my house. So we love our house. It's fantastic. But I couldn't afford to buy this house if I didn't speak Spanish and English, because I used my contacts, English and Spanish, to source out workers, materials, and stuff like that. And some Spanish friends of mine are building a house here, and they're going to build a similar house, but it's going to cost them 200,000 or 300,000 more, because they haven't got the experience or the contacts that I've got, that I've made through my years of working here in the building industry, not just with British people, but the Spanish firms and companies, So they've hired a company to do the building for them. They're going to pay top price on everything, For example, last week they're having some architraves fitted around the door. That's the door linings and things like that. And they're paying for the architraves that go around the door. I don't know if you know what architraves are, but they're the molded pieces that go around a door frame. in a house. So when you open a door inside and outside, you've got the framework. Well, they're 4 euros each piece to me, and you need three for each door. So say 9, 10 euros. Well, in the shop, if you go and buy it, they're 3 times the price. Well, that might not sound like a lot, but when you're building a house and you've got 10, 15 doors in the house, that's a few hundred euros more just on knowing where to go to buy the right materials from the builders merchants. And they're both work for the hospital. They're not builder orientated. So they've paid a company who's into all of that to do it for them, but they're going to pay more in the long run. They'll pay more. So yeah, learning the language has saved me a lot of money here. I've met my wife through it, and most of my Spanish friends, I would say 90% of my friends here, 90% or more are Spanish. Um, I've got more friends now that are English, but that's through the radio station because it's an English radio station here in Spain. Although it's global, we're all over the world, people can listen in. But I've got some Spanish people that listen in because they like to hear me talk on the radio to practice their, trying to understand. But it's the majority of people are English. But yeah, learning. Most people that fail here in Spain, there are only two reasons I've seen in my 22 years here that they fail. The number one is they don't learn the language. They say they will, but they don't. That is number one. The second is they don't do enough research on the area they're going to move to, and they find that it's not really for them. For example, people come here and they see a lovely place in a small village and they buy it. Then in the winter, when it's cut off for 2 months of the year, things are shut down and it's windy and rainy, because just 20 minutes inland from where I am, the climate is completely different in the winter. And there's no British people there. They've got a big plot of land. It's an older property, but when one of them's sick and they can't drive, who do they call to come and do their shopping? They need a doctor's appointment, but they can't phone up or make a doctor's appointment. They have to physically go there and queue up. They struggle. And in the end, a little illness can finish their life in Spain, and they go back. And I've seen many go back, and that is really the two reasons: lack of learning the language, or picking the wrong area, or lack of finances as well. But the finance part of it is all part of the research. You've got to have the finances to come here. People say, "Oh, I'm going to move to Spain." Years ago, you could move to Spain, live here, and then when it goes all wrong, you just get on a plane and go back. But now Spain with the visas and the requirements, it's a lot more money to invest to come here in the first place. You can't work here for the first year anyway on the non-lucrative visas. It's difficult. So it makes it, you've got to have funds in the bank. You've got to have a certain amount of funds in the bank. So all these restrictions, and the British people complain about it. But personally, if we had those sort of requirements in the UK, the UK wouldn't have the immigration problem they got now, So there you go. You got to, Canada vet people, America, Australia. I think Australia now it's $80,000 in the bank before they even process your paperwork to get, if you want to be a resident of Australia, So it's the way things are changing here, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if you live in a country that's not your own country, like I'm an immigrant, I'm what I class myself as a legal immigrant. I'm here. I've followed all the rules and regulations, but I don't want to change anything. I adapt to their customs and rules and regulations. I don't agree with a lot of them, I must admit, but this is their country. I enjoy it, so I follow their rules and regulations. So,
yeah. So, top two things you'd say: definitely learn the language and do your homework. Know where, like, the area you're moving to, and know what you're getting yourself in for. Mate, thank you so much for connecting with me. This has been really fun. I'll finish recording in a couple of minutes. Just stay on after though. Don't close it. I'd like to chat to you a little bit after, if that's all right with you. Where can people find you, man? Where's the best place? I will leave the links below, but just for
yeah,
the audio.
The best thing is I've got a website which is under development at the moment. When I finally get this new job, they're going to organise that for me. But it's davidwrightonline.com. Wright spelled with a W. davidwrightonline.com. And there's links there to my books, my podcasts, my videos, and also come and join on the radio show. It's Thursdays at 2 o'clock and Fridays at 4 o'clock. Fridays I have an expert guest, a wine expert from Madrid, giving recommendations for good bottles of wine. So yeah, I have some interesting guests on there now and then.
Yeah, sounds cool. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting to you again in the future, man. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having me. Cheers.